Hey everyone, in today's episode I'll discuss the 2025 election. I recently did an episode on the election, but the reason I do another one here is because there's been a few more promises made and the budgets of each party have actually been announced. So in today's episode I'll discuss a few things. First of all, our biggest pressing issues. Secondly, what each party is promising. Thirdly, the effect of each party. Then finally, the reality of our major parties. Look, it comes to no surprise that obviously our biggest issue is definitely the cost of living. And you can see here just on the right-hand side, this is just ABS and RBA data mixed with some other agencies as well. What's happened to spot prices in terms of energy, wholesale energy, electrical prices. And you'll see there that it's basically almost quadrupled in the space of about 2 to 3 years, which is just insane. And I think obviously something really should be done about that. But that's where it basically is right now, and you can see the futures price sort of there. Now, I do think they're probably being a bit optimistic there. I think it's probably going to stay higher for longer because, just giving people a tax-funded rebate is coming out of taxpayer money anyway. So that doesn't really force prices to go down. What they need to do is actually get the prices down rather than just give out tax money to get the price to make it look like prices are going down. So anyway, that's one of the biggest issues, and electricity prices are definitely one of the main central points to that. Housing crisis. Look, we're not, I don't think anyone's surprised. We're not really building enough houses, and we probably won't in the future either. But this is just a graph here. This is of ABS data as well. So you've got an idealistic scenario just on top in the red, and then you've got the realistic scenario just in the blue. So you can see basically once we've passed 2022, sort of mid-2022, it's just dropped off basically the face of the earth. And that lines up pretty much directly with our immigration as well. If anyone wants to fact check on that, we brought in, I think, 1.3 million people in the last 3 years or something like that. So that's one of the large reasons why it's happened. But even in an idealistic situation there, you can see we're well below. If you were to actually extrapolate that right to pretty much 2025, that number would probably be somewhere around the low to mid 300,000. So it's 320 to probably 350,000 dwellings we are short, and that number is continuing to get worse with our immigration. Look, private business, productivity and GDP, these are some of the worst things you can probably see on record, I think, for Australia. Now, don't get me wrong, GDP per capita has slightly gone up, but GDP in total has slightly gone up, but GDP per capita has consistently gone down for a long time now. Now, last quarter, sure, we were up in, the December quarter, 0.1%, but for the 6 previous quarters before that, we were down, and year to year we are down, and we probably will be for probably at least another year or two here. But worse than that is our productivity. So that's actually still negative, and it's been that way for the last few quarters, should I say. So we're nearly a whole year of, negative GDP actually worked in terms of productivity, and that's continuing, and no one's talking about this. So the thing is that the government doesn't say, and I don't know why anyone presses them on this, but they really should, is that to produce higher wages and better living, you need to be more productive with what you've got. And that also, if you're more productive, then therefore people can be paid more because they are actually producing more. You can't pay people more when they're not producing more. That's literally the way to ruin a business. But anyway, aside from that as well, I did put private business just in this heading as well. And the reason for that is, I don't know if people have looked at jobs growth data, but most of that has been government workers. So, where the industries that actually create, productivity growth aren't historically government industry. They're private industry. Governments spend taxpayer money, so it's a revolving door. Private industry creates tax because it's not already used tax from the government. So where the growth really needs to come is from private business and not government industry. I think it's something like 80 to 90% of job growth in the last, 2 quarters have been literally from the government, which is just awful for the future. But anyway, that's what's actually going on at the moment. Let's get into what each party is promising. So let's start with the Labor Party. So clearly, I don't think anyone would debate this. There's further government spending going to be promised. Definitely higher density. So New South Wales is a good example of that. So despite some people not liking it, I think it does need to be done. But high density is definitely promised. The transport orientated plan is a good example of that in New South Wales. And I know some Victorian councils and some areas of Victoria are actually quite pro higher density as well. With that government spending, there's 41,000 jobs being promised. That's in Canberra, which is unbelievable because I think there's only about 80,000 workers at the moment in Canberra. So it's increasing it by 50%. Further low and middle class income support and small tax offsets. So when I say small tax offsets, what I'm talking about is it's the income tax. That's what I'm talking about. As with that, there's some more cuts to taxpayers as well. That's actually right up to the higher bracket as well. More energy bill relief is another thing they're promising. So, look, basically, energy bill relief really itself is taxpayer money, but that's what they're promising. They're promising as well to cut HECS debts even further, which is interesting because HECS debts are actually, that's what someone's basically promising to go and do a degree for, but they're promising to cut it by even more. And they're obviously, being a Labor government, they want larger immigration numbers. Look, clearly it's looking like it's probably going to be a hung parliament as well. If it is, and they do win, it'll probably be basically Labor Party / Greens alliance, really, and they are very pro-immigration, so that is highly likely to happen. Labor already let in a lot of people, but the Greens want to let in even more, so that's probably heavily likely. Let's get into the coalition, or should I say the Liberal Party, what they are promising. First of all, they're promising fairly stagnant taxation, so they aren't promising any income tax cuts at all. They are, though, promising more to small and medium business tax offsets. So Labor is, I know, bringing down that instant asset write-off, whereas the coalition is still promising for it to be fairly high. I think it's somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 from memory. They've got government spending, but it's slightly lower. A policy that I think is quite good that will definitely bring down power prices, though, is the East Coast reservation policy. So for those that don't know what that is, it basically means that our gas companies have to reserve the amount of gas for our own people first before selling it off overseas. On the East Coast, we don't do that at the moment. On the West Coast, we do, hence why their power prices are significantly cheaper than ours on the East Coast. The coalition isn't promising as high density, that they don't have quite as pro-development as Labor. They are also promising a reduction in energy taxation, so that's the fuel excise tax. So, look, fuel prices will come down with that for sure, but that's only for 12 months, mind you, I should say. Promising as well, still immigration, it's fairly large, but it's slightly lower than the Labor Party, and definitely lower than the Greens, and further defence spending as well. So that'll increase actually quite significantly under the coalition. They're promising billions and billions of dollars to that. It's a percentage of the GDP as well. Let's have a look at what the effect will be of each of these parties. So when I say the effect, I really mean the effect on the housing market. So with Labor, overall prices will increase. This will, however, be dominated by the lower end of the market, particularly sub $1 million. However, the fundamentally strong suburbs will perform accordingly as they do. So what I mean by this is the suburbs that historically have low stock, are very well located, and have good income demographics or are gentrifying. That will still continue. Under Labor, the very top of the market as well will continue to rise. So I mean the top 1% will continue to rise. And the reason being is because they're not being as pro-business. What will happen is your larger companies will swallow up a lot of basically the smaller companies, and the market share will become very distorted between your big companies and your small to medium businesses will definitely suffer. I think from memory, in the last year or so, we've had the most insolvencies for small to medium businesses ever on record. So that will continue to happen. Also, the net effect of that will be home ownership levels will fall significantly, especially for the low to middle class. So that's probably what's going to happen under Labor if they continue to do what they do. Look, under the coalition, funny enough, it won't be too different. Prices will also increase, Major capitals and major regional centres, though, will perform best. Fundamentally, strong suburbs will also perform well, as will under Labor. However, when I say this with major capitals and regionals, they will continue. What I mean is they'll continue to significantly outpace the, like, should I say, smaller regional centres and the outback and, places that really aren't fundamental sort of areas. Home ownership levels, though, will improve overall, though what will happen here is most of the major capitals, although a lot of people can already argue they are, will become completely unreachable. So what you'll see places like Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Newcastle, Geelong, all these places start to pick up well over the $1 million mark. Maybe Geelong might approach the $1 million mark. Look, I don't mean in 3 years. I mean over the next decade or so, it will really start to happen. And the places where all the jobs are under the coalition will basically be completely out of reach for the average earner, which already is really the case in Sydney, especially I'd say Brisbane as well. And you could probably even argue the Gold Coast too. But, most of the other cities will become that way as well. So that's what's going to happen. Let's get into the reality of what's actually going on. So despite both parties, promising, immigration to go down, which is they don't admit it because our journalists are just crap. But the reality is, they promise that they're going to lower immigration. But the thing is, the thing with people is, especially politicians, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. That's what you need to do. So anyway, we had promises of lower immigration, and we've brought in roughly this Matusik graph via ABS only shows to 2023, but if you extrapolate that since COVID, we've had more than 1.3 million people brought into Australia in the middle of a housing crisis. And, a monkey could probably figure out that that's not the right thing to do. And mind you, in saying that, look, Labor and the Greens obviously do bring in more people, but the coalition is not much better. Since the kind of early 90s, despite whatever crisis we've been in, we've averaged at least usually somewhere around 300,000. That number's, to be honest, going up. On the right-hand side of the graph here, and I do trust Matusik because their data is actually very good. They're realists. They don't live in, a field of butterflies and think, everything's okay. But anyway, basically you'll see what they've predicted here. So you can see right up to 2033, so that's 8 years away basically. They're predicting over 350,000 in terms of population growth per year. So that's, mind you, when I say that, that's population growth. That's not immigration. So that means immigration will be higher because our birth rate is actually under the replacement rate. So I think it's about 1.7 and replacement rate's 2.1. So that's just the reality of what's actually happening on the ground in terms of immigration. Energy relief promises, and I don't know how no journalists ask this. I think they're given a script basically to ask questions because I know 6-year-olds who could ask better questions than most of the Australian journalists, but we get inflation figures out that are just absolute rubbish because it shows like a 11 to 15% reduction in energy prices, but the reduction really there is just your $275 power bill relief, but that's coming from the government. So that's not really a power bill relief because that's taxpayer money that you've already paid them that they're now saying is a relief. So you're still paying it. They're just doing it backdoor. And what they've promised as well here, and this is a Labor Party, they've promised that they therefore want to give you more energy bill relief, which that's not actually relief. That's just you paying it indirectly. So anyone who's actually, listening to that nonsense needs to go and look at where they get their money from. The government does not make money. They take money, then spend it. That's the way they do it. So look, I'm not trying to side with either party here, but this is not energy bill relief, that you are still paying for it in reality. So let's just get the facts straight with that. Another one, our money supply. So look, no one's probably questioning that, wages, asset prices do not correlate whatsoever. No one would question either that, basically the dollar doesn't buy as much as it did maybe 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Like, I mean, I remember back, talking to my parents, talking to my grandparents, the rest of them. I pretty much grew up in a household where there was one breadwinner. We lived comfortably, 2 kids. We weren't from a wealthy household or anything like that. We're perfectly well, comfortably. My grandparents as well. Most of my family back pre-80s, pre-90s as well. Had the same thing. Most of them had 3 or 4 kids or even more. No problems living like that either. And that's because the cost of living was reasonable, asset prices were reasonable. But for those that don't know, if you go back far enough, the dollar was taken off the gold standard under Nixon in the early 70s. And basically what's happened there since then is because there's no finite value to the dollar, money printing just goes on and on and on. And whenever anything goes wrong, all they do is print more money. So that's the issue that we have. So in this actual graph here, and the source is RBA, so there's no questioning it. You'll just see here, it's literally just an exponential graph here, and that only goes up to 2022. It continues to go up if you go to 2025, which is just insane. So really, what everyone should know is hard assets go up because all the money flows into them. That's the truth of what happens. Another thing, our taxation policy is awful on a global scale. This is just comparing the ASX and ASX 200 and S&P 500. So for those that don't really know, basically how our taxation works is, if you want to compare it to America, I'd call Australia basically in New York, New Jersey, or California all in one hit. That's the way I describe it in terms of how our taxation works. So it's just absolutely garbage. If anyone watches much about global politics or watches much about American businessmen coming into Australia, if anyone follows the UFC on this channel, you'll notice Dana White in a press conference recently was talking about it to the Australian media, and he was saying it's basically like running a production in California or New York. And he said the reason it's so hard to get big names over here for fight promotions or anything like that is simply because none of the athletes want to come over here because they know they're going to get taxed into oblivion. They'd rather fight in Vegas, they'd rather fight in Florida, they'd rather fight in Tennessee where you don't get taxed to the oblivion. So, and then what happens with that too is you then get underperforming share markets because no one wants to invest money in here because of ridiculous taxation. So look, if you look at the S&P 500 compared to the ASX, the S&P 500 since 2010 has done what? Like it's something like 6x. The ASX has done what? Like I think it's not even 50%. So that's a good example of what goes on here. Look, if you think about it from just the perspective I gave you of running an event, if you got some of the better, should I say, candidates or fighters for the UFC to come over here, you'd probably get maybe, I don't know, 600,000 pay-per-views instead of 150,000. So sure, you don't make as much in terms of taxing someone 40% or whatever the ridiculous taxation that they're charging him, but you get triple the amount of income. So you maybe tax them half, but triple the amount of income in terms of the actual pay-per-view, so you actually make more money. So that's what our idiot socialistic government doesn't understand. And mind you, this is when I say this is both the, should I say, Coalition and Labor Party. The Labor is worse, definitely. The Coalition's not much better in terms of taxation. So this is what they both do. So, I mean, let's just be realistic here about our taxation policy. It's garbage. If I were to rate it out of 100, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 100, and that's probably me being nice. I probably should give it a 1, but anyway, that's really where we are. But anyway, that's really what's going on in our markets at the moment, the truth of what's actually happening. Look, what I really think is going to happen here is, as I hate to say it, if we continue to vote in major political parties in the establishment, what really is going to happen is this is just going to continue more and more and more. You'll get Labor 1 year, Labor 1 or 2 terms, Liberal 1 or 2 terms. Well, it's been that way for as long as I can remember it. The asset prices will continue to go up. We'll continue to get flooded with immigrants that we don't need. We'll continue to get flooded with immigrants that aren't skilled as well in industries that we need. There'll be more government employees, which is ridiculous. And I mean, the future's kind of looking like an Argentinian 1970s to prior Javier Milei sort of future. So we really need to start getting out here and actually thinking about what we're going to do. I know a minor party isn't going to win the election for probably realistically 15 years or something like that, but the sooner it happens, probably the better, because I mean, the financial management of the country is pretty poor. But anyway, look, if I should say to everyone, if you're looking to invest in anything like that and you want to be on the right side of it, this does, however, show, I know it's not good for the whole country, but if you want to get ahead, this does show great value into investing in real estate if you can afford to, because what will happen is you'll continue to make money above the market average. So that's what you need to do to, should I say, improve your wealth to ungodly territory and really set yourself up for the future. So if that's you, check out a lot of my other videos. And if you are serious about getting ahead, please reach out via www.compoundinvest.com.au. I do offer free half-an-hour consultations, so I suggest you do so. Look, thanks again, everyone. Enjoy your voting week and your democracy sausage, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.